Hello everyone, I am Lynn, and today we're going to talk about the real history of the Cabbage Patch baby dolls, incubators, orphan trains, and things like that. So if you've not heard of the history of the real Cabbage Patch dolls, you might be in for a surprise. So hang tight, here we go. Okay everyone, so the question, Lynn, could you do a reading about the orphan trains and whether the Cabbage Patch Kids and incubator babies of the 1800s were really clones? So what's going on here? What's the real history of these Cabbage Patch baby dolls that were the craze in the 80s? And when I focus on this, and this stuff did really happen, there's documents of it in history, I get there was a heightened point in our human timeline that human trade, I can't really say it, so I'm trying to say it without saying it. It's been going on ever since then. Since the 1800s, people have been doing things, trading people for different reasons. And this was a time that they were trying to repopulate certain areas, get certain areas inhabited, indoctrinate people, and things of that nature. So, and the population was lower, and there was a lot of unexplored, unsettled land. The powers that were, which have been pulling puppet strings for decades upon decades now, they tried to control the world so that they would basically steal children. They'd steal expectant mothers. They would steal girls of child-rearing age to impregnate, to essentially redistribute people to the highest bidder and repopulate the newer lands, these newer areas. The powers that were knew the value of their land, but they needed the people to live on it and improve the land. So we've all heard about these incubator babies and the World's Fair and all that. Really, the World's Fair just served as a place where people could go and meet and pay money to buy kids, redistribute kids, and things like that. It wasn't as maybe innocent and pure as what it was. There was an agenda behind a lot of things that happened in our history. I get that many times parents of the stolen kids, they were put in institutions, and mothers that were used as the baby makers were also made to look insane and hidden. They punished the few for, the agenda and the repopulation and population growth to happen. So basically, you had to allow it to exist, or you were going to find yourself in an institution. It's also a time that the only media that we saw was the propaganda that they made available. They didn't have the ways to do the research that we did now. There was not just a computer and the internet to be able to go and seek things out. So basically what you had was what you got word of mouth, what you saw with your own eyes, and what they allowed you to see. They glorified these orphans and incubators and all this stuff. And if you spoke against it or questioned it, you might have been lobotomized, because they were pretty determined that this was going to happen, and they were going to get this indoctrinated new population out there. The premise of these Cabbage Patch Kids, I get, this, it predates the 1980s. Yes, that's when we all heard of it, that, are here with us right now, but it started long before then, probably 100 years before then. And this massive collection of motherless babies living in circular incubators, it looked like a field of cabbages. Let's think about this word nursery here. There's so many words that have these double meanings. And a play on words, let's think. A place for a baby is called a nursery, but also there's a place for young plants called a nursery. And they made this cutesy name for the attending nurses of this Cabbage Patch collection, and they called them Cabbage Fairies. It was much more palatable than saying that this person is the keeper of stolen children. And, fast forward to the 1900s and the emergence of Disney, who's one of the darkest people tied to these powers that were. Their movies, let's think about Disney here for a second. They're filled with repetitive, inappropriate symbols in all of the movies. Go in and do your research and just watch a movie and see how it just resonates and what it feels like energetically. And if you really, really think about it, it's full of phallic symbols, 666, sexual references. That's a whole different reading, and I've done readings on that before. But again, go in and do your research. But then also, let's think about this too. And looking at the theme of their movies, how many of these characters were orphaned or away from their parents? They couldn't help but show truth in plain sight, and it also showed knowledge of the past. And they were very blatant in your face. They didn't even really try to hide it. Like most evil people in these evil groups, what do? You try to make money and market what you know. And that's exactly what they did. Just as they did 100 years prior, they created this need or this urgency, and they made kids desire to get their coveted child. So before then, it was adults going in and adopting and going through that process, and, oh, we're going to the World's Fair, we're going to get a baby. Well, now they've got kids, you know, they figured out how to do that. Then, you know, this Cabbage Patch Kid, what? It came with papers. It already had a name. It already had a birth certificate. You went through an adoption process. They had these Cabbage Patch hospitals mimic Cabbage Patch fairy scenarios that happened 100 years before then. They basically were repeating exactly what they did. They just were marketing to a different group of people with different needs. Only this time it was children. And you know, this entire Cabbage Patch craze, it was based truly on this sick story of just repopulating and indoctrinating a whole new society of people. And I admit it, I was guilty of it too. I remember being like 10, 11 years old, and I wanted more than anything a Cabbage Patch doll for Christmas, and I got one, and her name was Helena, and yes, I adopted her. So for all you out there, I mean, it happens to all of us, and I still have her today. She's packed away as a keepsake of my childhood, but nonetheless, it's out there, guys. So do your research, read about these dolls, see how it resonates with you, if this story rings true to you, and just how dark and honestly a little creepy once you really get to know the truth and it resonates with you. I will leave you with that. Again, I'm Lynn with Psychic Focus. Please hop on over to the blog, check me out, like and share my work. It's so helpful, and I'm so grateful for the community we have. And I will see you in my next video. Take care. Bye.